Let us pause the frame right here. You and I are going to unpack this moment together, because the psychological weight of this scene is staggering. Picture a vast penthouse office. The wind is howling off the lake, beating against the glass. Right in the middle of this fortress sits Leon Moretti, a crime boss who terrifies half the city, yet he is completely frozen. Why? Because of a whisper from a 7-year-old girl named Sophie. She stands no taller than his mahogany desk, clutching a blue crayon like a shield. She is the child of the housekeeper. The invisible ghost coloring on marble floors, while armed men march past, and she just casually dropped a truth that will shatter his entire reality. The lesson here is simple. Our greatest vulnerabilities are rarely exposed by our enemies, but by the innocent observers we forget to notice. Now, Leon is not just an ordinary man in a tailored suit. He is the head of the Moretti Syndicate. His mere name makes grown men sweat in the streets of Chicago. He studies this tiny girl for a long, agonizing second. When he asks her to repeat her words, his voice is terrifyingly calm. Sophie repeats it, shooting a fearful glance at the open door. Like a child checking for monsters in the dark, here is the tragic core of his world. Leon has survived for 20 years because he is a human lie detector. He knows the shape of a lie, the sound of a lucky guess, and the crushing weight of absolute truth. Sophie is carrying that final burden. Slowly, the untouchable mob boss rises, walks around his massive desk and drops to one knee. He asks her to show him. It shows us that sometimes finding the truth requires us to bow down and kneel. She does not utter a single word. Instead, this fragile child grabs 2 of his thick fingers and gently pulls him toward the desk. She puts a finger to her lips, instructing the most dangerous man in the city to be quiet. Leon humbles himself, ducking beneath the heavy oak wood. At first, there are only shadows and polished grain, but then, the camera pushes in and we finally see it, a little black box. Barely the size of a matchbook, taped beneath the desk with terrifying precision. It is aimed directly at the leather chair he was just sitting in. A tiny green light flashes. Blink, blink, it is soaking up every secret in the room. Leon just freezes there in the dark. It is one of those profound moments where the silence screams louder than words. It proves that betrayal often grows quietly in the dark spaces we refuse to look at. Think about the sheer gravity of this specific room. This is the exact spot where Leon has listened to broken men beg for their lives. From that very chair he has signed off on brutal deals that wiped out entire rival factions, and all the while an unseen enemy was listening. You can literally see the storm brewing in his jawline. His fist clenches up hard against his leg, vibrating with the urge to destroy. But then, the protective mask slips back into place. His face goes completely dead, as cold as a stone wall. He reaches up and peels the surveillance bug off the wood, handling it like an active grenade. That little green light just keeps blinking. Mocking him, right in his palm, he sets the device down. It teaches us that true power is never about reacting to the pain, but rather mastering your emotional response when the knife twists. He drops back to the eye level of little Sophie, and his voice is softer than we have ever heard it. He calls her sweetheart and asks the ultimate question: did she see who planted it? The little girl checks the hallway once more, leans into his ear, and whispers the one name that could actually break this hardened man: Miss Bella, his fiancée. I want you to feel the weight of those 3 seconds where Leon literally forgets how to breathe. The name hangs in the air, toxic and suffocating. We are talking about Isabella Russo, the woman he is supposed to marry at the cathedral in exactly 11 days. She wears a diamond that cost a massive fortune. The deepest lesson here is that high walls can keep out an army. But they mean nothing when you willingly invite the assassin into your home. This is the same woman who kissed him right there in that office just a few hours ago. But the face of Leon remains perfectly blank. Here is a hard truth about his dark reality. The real danger is never the heartbreak itself, it is letting your enemies see you bleed. So, he keeps his tone gentle and asks Sophie to explain everything. The poor kid shifts nervously. She explains how her mom was cleaning yesterday, and she sneaked up to grab her missing blue crayon. The door was cracked open. She heard the voice of Isabella and froze. Then Isabella shut the door and started checking the corners of the room. It is deeply tragic that it takes an innocent child to expose the biggest blind spot in a powerful man. It shows us that we often miss the deceit right in front of us, simply because our deep affection completely blinds us to the truth. You and I have to stop and admire the pure raw courage of this little girl. She tells Leon how Isabella knelt right behind his desk, pulled that small device out of her purse and stuck it to the wood. Leon gives a slow, heavy nod. Then Sophie mentions the phone call. She hid behind the heavy curtains, absolutely terrified. She looks up at him with wide eyes, explaining how she came back today, just to make sure she was not imagining things. But the green light was still blinking. Leon finally stands up and steps behind his desk. He taps the keyboard, and a cold blue glow washes over his face. He punches in a password that is a total ghost. Nobody knows it. Not his guards, not his loyal captains. It is a brilliant lesson that a wise person always keeps one final line of defense, a quiet boundary that absolutely no one is allowed to cross. The monitor flares to life, revealing a completely hidden security network. Leon built this shadow system 3 years ago. There are tiny lenses tucked into the bookshelves, the ornate lamps, and even the ceiling trim. These are cameras that his perfect fiancée had no idea were watching. He scrubs the timeline back to yesterday afternoon, and there she is. The door opens and Isabella glides in. It is fascinating to watch this, because she moves with a confident elegance that Leon used to be utterly mesmerized by. She pushes the door shut with her fingertips. She stands in the center of the room, like she owns the entire crime family. We watch her scan the ceiling and the windows, then she drops to her knees exactly where Sophie claimed and reaches under the desk. It is a bitter lesson that those we elevate the highest are best positioned to cut us the deepest. She stands back up, casually brushes off her skirt and brings her phone to her ear. Leon cranks the volume on his computer. The voice of Isabella rings out, smooth and sweet as honey, but the words are pure venom. She tells whoever is on the other line that the bug is planted and Leon is too busy to notice. Then comes the fatal blow. She promises that after the wedding, the entire Moretti empire will belong to them. Every dollar, every street, every political contact. And then she laughs. It is the exact same beautiful laugh Leon has fallen asleep next to for months. She brags about how much he trusts her. The video stops. Leon sits there like a statue, staring at the frozen frame of the woman he loved. This scene teaches us a brutal reality. Trust is a beautiful gift, but when handed to the wrong soul, it becomes a devastating weapon used against you. In that paused, digital frame, she is standing behind his chair like she is already the syndicate boss. Sophie is just watching him process this total devastation. And right on cue, a gentle knock echoes from the heavy door, before Leon can even speak. The handle turns and in walks Isabella. She is flashing that flawless smile, her diamond ring catching the warm office lights. She calls him darling, playing the part of the perfect partner who has been searching the house for him. Leon slowly looks up at her. It is a chilling, cinematic shift. For the first time since they met, the romantic illusion is shattered. He does not see his future wife anymore. All he sees is a traitor draped in a cream coat. Life often forces us into these moments of brutal clarity, where the pleasant lies burn away, leaving only the cold, undeniable truth behind for us to face. With absolute ice in his veins, Leon shuts down the security footage in a fraction of a second, just one casual click of the mouse. And the screen flips back to an ordinary screensaver. Now watch little Sophie in this shot. Kids possess an incredible survival instinct. Without making a single sound, she melts right back behind those heavy curtains. Isabella drops her expensive bag on the side table and floats over to him. She leans down and places a tender kiss on his forehead. Think about the psychological sickness of that action. She is kissing him in the exact spot where she was just plotting his total ruin. Leon forces his mouth into a weary smile. He plays the part perfectly, joking that the financial numbers will not read themselves. The lesson here is profound. True emotional restraint is smiling at the storm while you quietly prepare your shelter. Let us look closer at how Isabella moves. She wanders around the room doing that casual, floaty walk she always does. Her fingers lightly brush the old books on the shelf and slide right over the edge of his desk, the exact piece of wood where she planted the wire 24 hours earlier. If you pay attention, she is looking at the room like a new homeowner planning a renovation. She tilts her head, putting on a brilliant mask of deep concern, and asks if he is feeling distant today. Leon leans back in his chair. He gives her the ultimate performance of a stressed-out boss who completely trusts his partner. He sighs and feeds her a perfect little lie about his crew in Detroit fighting over territory. He is setting the trap right in front of her. This moment proves that patience is a weapon, and sometimes you must let an enemy believe they are winning. The moment Leon drops the word Detroit, the mask slips. Just for a microsecond, you catch a tiny flicker in her eyes. It is the cold stare of a card player realizing they just drew the winning hand. But Isabella is a master of this game, and the warmth rushes back instantly. She slips into the role of the devoted fiancé, whispering that he should not carry the syndicate alone. She actually slides onto his lap, pressing her hand against his chest while that blinding, fake diamond catches the light. She murmurs promises of a quiet life, an end to the fighting and the lonely nights. The irony here is absolutely staggering. She is promising him peace while silently picking out the flowers for his funeral. It is a harsh reminder that sometimes the most comforting lies come from the people standing closest to us. Let us look at this piece by piece, shall we? Isabella strokes his jawline and whispers that soon everything will be theirs. That single word hits Leon like a physical blow. It perfectly echoes the recording he just finished watching. It is the identical greedy tone she used while whispering to her secret partner on the phone. But Leon did not build a crime family by being careless. He is a survivor. He pulls her in close, just like he has done 1,000 times before. Kissing the side of her head, he forces his voice to sound entirely loving as he tells her he trusts her. She smiles into his shoulder, completely convinced she has secured the throne. Minutes later, she drifts out of the room, leaving behind the heavy scent of expensive perfume and a sealed fate. It teaches us a grim truth. Surviving betrayal often means you have to hold the blade before you can disarm it. The heavy wooden door clicks shut, and Leon is left standing there like a man turned to stone. He looks down at his massive oak desk, and right under the warm lamplight is a fading handprint. Her handprint, that tiny smudge of oil and warmth, just signed his death warrant. The bitterest part of this psychological warfare is not the impending violence. It is that only he realizes the bullets are already flying. It is almost midnight as he walks down the hallway of his estate, and the silence is completely crushing. The grandfather clock ticks away his remaining hours, while an oblivious guard wanders downstairs. It is a beautiful gilded ghost town, and Leon is already the main spirit haunting it. We see here the ultimate tragedy of power. The higher you climb the ladder, the more alone you are when it breaks. By now the mansion is mostly empty. Isabella left an hour ago, but her expensive perfume still hangs in the air like a lingering poison. Leon stops at the top of the sweeping marble staircase. Right at the bottom, sitting in a small pool of yellow lamplight, is little Sophie Carter. She sits cross-legged on the cold stone, a tiny backpack spilling brightly colored crayons completely focused on a drawing. Leon drifts down those stairs without making a single sound. He spent his entire criminal career learning how to slip into a room undetected. The visual contrast is stunning. A lethal predator, trained in the brutal arts of the underworld, tiptoeing around a 7-year-old girl. She never looks up until his giant shadow falls beside her. It reminds us that pure innocence has a quiet power. It can disarm the hardest hearts without lifting a finger. "You are still awake," he says, his voice surprisingly soft for a man who rules the underworld. Sophie explains her mother is scrubbing the upstairs bathrooms, waiting for the last bus. Leon drops down onto the marble steps. Resting his elbows on his knees, he points at her paper and asks what she is making. She reveals a simple drawing of a house with a sloped roof and bright yellow windows. Inside are 3 stick figures standing closely together. "It is a beautiful house," Leon tells her, asking who lives there. Her answer is a profound emotional strike. "The family that never leaves," she says. Here is a little girl dreaming of basic permanence, talking to a syndicate boss whose entire empire is actively crumbling. It serves as a haunting reminder that the stable life we often overlook is the exact miracle someone else is desperately praying for. Something inside the cold crime boss completely freezes. He stares at those little figures safe inside their yellow window. Then looks at this brave kid. He asks her softly why she kept the hidden microphone a secret from her own mother. Sophie picks up a green crayon, casually coloring a tree, and explains that her mom would be terrified of losing her cleaning job. What follows is a harsh societal truth from a 7-year-old. She tells Leon her mother always warns that poor folks must watch their backs around the wealthy, because rich people do not always mean to destroy your life, but sometimes they crush you anyway, simply by walking too fast. A child is explaining the brutal reality of collateral damage to a man who creates it daily. It reveals a sobering truth. Immense power often blinds us to the heavy footprints we leave on the lives of others. Leon stays perfectly quiet because he knows that bitter lesson intimately. He heard those exact words from his own mother decades ago. Long before the dirty money and the spilled blood, he asks her why she chose to tell him and not the armed security guards. Sophie looks this terrifying syndicate boss dead in the eye and says it is his office, so he should be way more scared than she is. He actually almost laughs, Instead of calling his muscle, he pulls out his private leather notebook, tears out the used pages, and hands it to her with a pencil. He instructs her to write down anything strange from now on. He is deputizing a little girl in a pink shirt because she is the only person in his fortress with a shred of actual loyalty. We are forced to realize that true loyalty cannot be bought with money. It is only found in the most honest human connections. Let us shift our focus, because this is where the tension truly snaps, like a seasoned detective. Sophie takes that little book in both hands as if it were a sacred relic. Leon watches her pack it away, and the weight of the moment hits hard. For the first time in years, this ruthless kingpin finally trusts a human being, and it happens to be a 7-year-old armed with a blue pencil now. We turn to Dante Russo. Leon called him at 5 a.m. with 3 simple words. "Come to me," by the second ring. Dante was already grabbing his coat. An hour later, Dante is in the private study, watching the footage our little crayon detective uncovered. It is a brilliant collision of 2 entirely different worlds. It reminds us that trust is a fragile currency. When the vault breaks, the most unlikely people end up picking up the scattered pieces. Dante watches the glowing screen like a carved statue. He does not flinch when Isabella crawls under the desk on the video, nor does he blink at her treacherous laugh. Dante was a soldier long before he became the primary executioner for the crime family, and nothing in this ugly world makes his pulse race anymore. When the tape finishes, the silence is suffocating. He simply asks who is pulling her strings. Leon hands over a printed slip with a phone number. Dante folds it, slides it into his jacket, and vanishes like smoke before Leon finishes his coffee. The most unsettling part of this tragedy is what happens next. For 24 hours, life in this giant mansion carries on as if death is not already walking the halls. It is a stark reminder that true danger never announces itself. The absolute loudest tragedies in life are often born in total silence. The atmosphere becomes entirely surreal, like a morbid theater. The chef is casually roasting vegetables, and the gardeners are trimming the hedges as if it is a flawless spring day. At noon, Marco Bellini strolls in, cracking jokes about Leon entering married life. Isabella actually calls twice to complain about the floral arrangements. Leon sits there, playing the loving fiancé without missing a beat, acting as though his biggest problem is whether the lilies will be fresh. It is a masterclass in psychological deception from both sides. But then the sun sets, and Dante slips back through the service door. Keeping his heavy coat on, he tells Leon to sit, dropping a thin folder on the desk, with the caution of a man handling a live grenade. It teaches us a haunting lesson. The most violent battles we ever fight in this life are often hidden behind a perfectly polite smile. Dante methodically lays out the digital breadcrumbs. The phone number bounced through 4 shell companies, moving from the islands to Toronto, before stopping at a dirty storefront in Brighton Beach. Leon locks his jaw, knowing that is where the Russian syndicate buries its mistakes. Dante slides a grainy surveillance photo across the desk. It shows a heavy man stepping out of a black sedan, his eyes looking like frozen steel. Viktor Dragunov. When Dante speaks that name, the words hit the heavy air like a cinder block dropping into a bathtub. This is no longer a story of a greedy fiancé looking for a quick payout. This is a full-blown invasion from a monster who views local thugs as simple target practice. We are reminded of a difficult truth today. The roots of our absolute deepest problems usually reach far deeper down than we are ever willing to dig. Stick with me here, because the psychology of this move is chilling. For 5 years, Viktor Dragunov has tried to sink his teeth into the Chicago syndicate. 5 years of bribing cops, sending in violent crews, and watching Leon send them back in wooden boxes. Leon truly believed he had won, but Dragunov operates on a twisted philosophy. He always says, "Do not bother attacking the fortress, just marry the owner." Leon slowly sinks into his leather chair, staring out the window out there. The dark waters of Lake Michigan stretch out, completely gray and entirely indifferent to his breaking heart. He realizes his entire romance was manufactured in a cold Russian boardroom. The woman he loved was nothing more than a beautiful Trojan horse. It leaves us with a profound realization today. The most effective way to truly destroy someone is to simply make them open their own gates. Let us look at this piece by piece, shall we? This story has shed its skin, morphing from a tragic romance into a desperate fight for survival. Just as that reality settles, a hesitant knock breaks the silence. Little Sophie stands in the doorway, gripping a worn notebook like a shield. She whispers that she saw a white-haired man speaking with Marco. This is the moment the universe shatters, Leon. Marco. The name refuses to register. This is the man who carried his father to the grave, who took a bullet for him in Cleveland. Marco is the only true brother this isolated, violent man has ever known. To hear that name fall from a child's lips is a betrayal so profound it makes his earlier heartbreak feel meaningless. It is a harsh truth of life. The deepest cuts always come from the hands we trust to protect us. Leon swallows his grief, forcing his voice into a terrifying calm as he invites her inside. Dante steps aside, yielding the floor to a 7-year-old informant. Leon demands every detail, his face a perfect mask of stone. Sophie opens her notebook, tracing her careful, childish handwriting. She describes a tall man, with pulled-back white hair and a dark coat. But then she delivers the detail that seals Marco's fate. She says the man had mean eyes, empty like a dead fish. Dante immediately snaps his gaze to Leon. That is no childish guess, it fits perfectly, like a heavy iron key turning in a rusted lock. She is describing Anatoly Volkov, the senior enforcer for the Russian syndicate, a man who leaves nothing but grief in his wake. It reminds us that pure innocence often sees the darkness adults try so desperately to ignore. This is the phantom who handles the ugliest sins for the Russian mob. The ghost Dante has chased through blurry photographs all week. Leon stares down at the little notebook. Her delicate pencil marks record the exact time of death for his brotherhood. 3:15 in the afternoon. She notes that Marco shook the monster's hand twice, once in greeting, and once to seal a pact of blood. And at the bottom of the page lies a tragic irony. She drew 2 stick figures, one with messy white hair, holding a tiny square briefcase between them. It is a drawing born of absolute innocence, yet it stands as undeniable evidence of treason. Leon looks at her, praises her flawless work, and quietly tells her to find her mother. The most devastating truths in life are often delivered in the simplest, most unexpected ways. He softly warns her to stay close to her mother tonight. As the little girl slips into the hallway, the air in the office turns to freezing lead. Leon swivels his security monitor so Dante can see, tapping into a hidden camera feed that no one else knows exists. He scrubs the timeline back to 3 o'clock, and there it is, playing out in agonizing clarity, his closest confidant, Marco. Walking the garden path to meet the Russian nightmare. They speak for 9 long minutes before the Russian hands over a thick briefcase. Marco accepts the blood money without a tremor of hesitation, but the detail that truly twists the knife, before turning away. Marco glances up nervously at Leon's office window. He knew exactly what he was destroying, and chose to do it anyway. We all face choices that define our character. Some simply choose the dark. We have all witnessed a moment like this before, have we not? The classic heartbreaking anatomy of betrayal. Volkov strolls toward the exit, perfectly relaxed while Marco heads back inside clutching the briefcase. He carries it with casual ease, as if it holds mundane office memos. But let us pause the tape right here. When Leon zooms in, we see Marco's fatal flaw. He was arrogant, leaving a tiny gap in the brass clasp of the bag. Through that slit, the camera catches the edge of American currency and a printed document. It is Leon's private directory, the names of every loyal captain, every paid judge. Marco is not just stealing cash. He is selling the very skeleton of their world. Leon slams his hand against the desk, the sound echoing like a rifle shot. Greed always has a way of blinding us to the true cost of our actions. That violent strike against the wood is the very first crack in Leon's armor. After 3 days of suffocating silence, Dante stands rigid, his eyes locked onto his leader, and quietly asks for just 1 hour to ensure Marco never makes it home. But this is where the psychology of power truly takes hold. Leon shakes his head, his voice cooling into hardened steel. He commands Dante to let the traitor believe he is winning. A man who thinks he is untouchable, Leon explains, becomes the easiest target on Earth. Dante offers a single understanding nod, as Leon turns to gaze out over the black waters of the lake. You can almost see the terrible machinery of his mind engaging. A devastating calculated response is taking form in life. Patience is often the absolute most dangerous weapon a betrayed person can choose to wield. This looming strategy will weave 3 separate enemies into the exact same trap, and the stage for this inevitable tragedy. A date already circled in bright red on every calendar in the mansion, the upcoming wedding. Now shift your focus to the very next afternoon. Little Sophie is swallowed by the massive leather chair in Leon's office. Her small feet cannot even reach the floor, gently kicking in her loose sneakers. The afternoon sun warms the vintage rug, painting a scene of profound, deceptive peace looking at her. You would never imagine a brutal mob war is brewing just beyond that heavy door. Leon brought her upstairs pretending he needs a child's imagination to help design a charity program. It is a heartbreakingly clever shield. It shows how easily we can mask our darkest intentions behind a comforting veil of innocent virtue. Her mother, Rosa, surrendered to the request, nodding the way exhausted people do when they cannot afford to deny a powerful man. But pay attention to Sophie. A troubled shadow falls across her forehead. She looks up at Leon and asks a question that shatters the room. Why does nobody ever see her? She explains how Marco and the pale stranger walked right past her bench. Their eyes slid right over her. She notes that Isabella does it, and the guards do it too. With quiet sadness, she asks if she is truly that small. It is a deeply agonizing moment of self-awareness. Leon is struck silent, forced to confront the tragic reality of a child treated like a ghost. He studies her carefully, like a grandmaster analyzing a board. We often overlook the quietest souls in the room, never realizing just how much of our truth they are silently absorbing. Leon leans in and offers her a profound piece of truth. He explains that she is not too small at all, rather. Adults are simply too consumed by their own selfish pursuits, hunting for briefcases and chasing money. They train themselves to ignore the quiet things. And here is where Sophie delivers a thought that will stop you in your tracks. She shares her mother's secret. When people refuse to look at you, she says, that is exactly when you get to see who they truly are. Just place yourself in Leon's shoes for a moment. Powerful men have built entire intelligence empires upon that single philosophy. Yet here it is. Spoken by a 7-year-old who learned it from a weary maid scrubbing Mafia floors. There is immense power in being underestimated, sometimes. It is the invisible people among us who hold the true keys to the kingdom. Leon gently replies that her mother is a profoundly brilliant woman, and Sophie accepts this with a simple nod. Then, resting his heavy arms on the mahogany desk, he carefully asks about her father. That small shadow of worry returns to her face. She explains that her dad went away for important work 2 years ago and simply never came home. When she innocently reveals he was a police officer, the cosmic irony of the underworld comes crashing down. Leon forces his features to remain completely still, but beneath the surface, a dark memory plunges like a stone in cold water 2 years ago. A determined Chicago detective was quietly building a fatal case against the Moretti family. He was just a young father trying to cleanse the city, blind to the fact he was digging his grave. Our actions always echo across time, often striking the innocent. They eventually found that detective's frozen car near the icy waters of the lake. Leon had actually attended the man's funeral. Standing in the shadows to pay quiet respect, he always carried a strange reverence for honest men, even the ones his syndicate was forced to destroy. But he never knew that brave officer left behind a little girl. Let the crushing weight of that silence settle in the room for a moment. Finally, Leon closes the fake file and meets her eyes. He tells Sophie to listen with absolute focus. She sits up, entirely captivated. This powerful crime lord then asks a tiny child to become his personal ghost. He instructs her to watch Isabella. If she hides in a hallway to make a call, Sophie must record every single word, and Sophie simply says, "Yes, sir," sometimes. The cycle of violence offers us a strange chance at redemption. Leon delivers the final terrifying condition of this secret game. He tells her she cannot trust a single soul wandering the halls of this massive estate, except for him and Dante. Not the guards, not the maids, and absolutely not Marco. Sophie absorbs this with a heartbreaking level of gravity. She carefully tucks the notebook back into her tiny backpack, pulling the straps tight. In a matter of minutes, a 7-year-old orphan has become the most vital intelligence asset in the Moretti family. Now, fast forward to the fading light of that evening. Leon descends the grand staircase and freezes in his tracks. The formal dining room is glowing with the cinematic light of tall candles. Laid out on the table is the sacred family silver, pieces his grandmother brought from Palermo. It shows how easily we dress our darkest deceptions in beautiful tradition. Resting near the silver is a rare bottle of Brunello, an extravagant vintage worth more than his security team earns in a month. The chandelier is dimmed, casting a flawless romantic hue across the room, and standing there by the stove is Isabella. She is draped in the elegant black dress he gifted her for her 30th birthday, the very one she promised to wear only for his eyes. There is even a delicate smudge of white flour on her wrist. Adding domestic realism to her performance, she turns, catches the sound of his footsteps, and offers a slow, captivating smile. But here is the tragic psychological punchline. In their 2 years together, Isabella Russo has never once prepared a meal in this house. She hires caterers and throws parties. But she does not cook. She looks at him and softly whispers surprise. The most dangerous lies in this world are always the ones beautifully plated for our affection. Leon steps down into the meticulously crafted trap. Masking his awareness, Isabella glides over, wrapping her arms around his neck, whispering that tonight, the world expects nothing from him. The bitter irony hangs heavy in the air. He plays his part flawlessly, drinking the expensive wine like a king secure in his fortress. She has prepared his favorite meal, specifically avoiding the cream sauces he despises, offering bread torn by hand just the way he likes it. She memorized 1,000 intimate details. But as Leon watches her, a chilling clarity washes over him. None of this is love. Every gentle touch is a weaponized tactic. They sit in the candlelight, breathing life into a beautiful, venomous lie. We often forget a simple truth: intimacy without genuine care is just surveillance disguised as affection. Let's look closely, because this is where the velvet glove slips. They sit discussing Sicily. Isabella elegantly swirls her wine, casually mentioning a dream honeymoon in his grandfather's village. Leon smiles, matching her rhythm, then letting the quiet settle. She reaches across the candles and strikes. She asks him to sign over the shipping ports after the wedding, claiming she wants to ease his heavy burdens. Those ports are the beating heart of his empire, the exact prize his enemy Dragunov has hunted for 5 bitter years. She asks for the keys to the kingdom, while softly holding his hand. It reminds us of a hard truth: the greatest betrayals never arrive with a shout, but with a gentle smile from someone we thought we knew. Leon stares at the woman he was supposed to marry, his gaze piercing through the candlelight. He does not even blink. He quietly tells her that, of course, she is going to be his wife. Isabella strokes his knuckles and asks if he trusts her. For the first time since hearing her voice on that damning wiretap, Leon looks deep into her eyes. He keeps his tone warm, swearing he trusts her more than anyone. The true tragedy is that a small bleeding part of him likely wishes it were still true. She smiles, completely satisfied with her manipulation, takes a final sip of wine, and walks away. Leon remains frozen at the table. Life teaches us a harsh lesson. Here, letting go of a beautiful illusion is often far more painful than the actual betrayal itself. Leon watches the candlelight dance in his dark red wine, his memory pulling him back 2 years. He recalls meeting a stunning woman in a red dress at a charity gala. She laughed flawlessly at his joke about opera, and he genuinely believed it was fate. Now, the crushing reality takes hold. He wonders if someone paid her to laugh that night. It is devastating to realize your great romance was merely a calculated transaction. Cut to Friday morning. The estate is swallowed by a freezing fog. Leon sits at his desk, reviewing a fabricated shipping ledger meant as bait for Marco. Suddenly, he hears heavy, unfamiliar footsteps echoing in the hall. It is a reminder that we must always question what seems too perfect, because manufactured destiny usually comes with a steep price tag. Let us pause and examine this exact frame, because the psychological tension here is brilliant. 2 distinct sets of footsteps approach. One is Marco, trying to play it smooth and casual. But right behind him, the steps land like falling anvils. The door swings open, and Marco attempts to sell a warm, friendly smile, but it is entirely hollow. The man standing behind him is built like a concrete wall, hardened by years of brutal Siberian winters. He wears a heavy leather coat, his hair is buzzed to the scalp, and his eyes carry absolute emptiness. The life lesson here is incredibly straightforward. When a supposed friend walks into your room trying far too hard to smile, you need to keep your focus entirely on the silent threat standing right behind them. The giant steps right past Marco, offering a stiff, deeply formal nod. When he finally speaks, his voice sounds like grinding metal. He claims it is a pleasure to meet, but Leon refuses to even stand. Leon already knows the identity of this walking tank. This is Mikhail Sorokin, a former Special Forces operative, the exact nightmare you send when a message requires broken bones. Dante had warned Leon about him just 48 hours ago. Sorokin holds Leon in a dead stare and delivers congratulations from his boss, Dragunov, regarding the upcoming wedding. You can practically hear the poison dripping from every single syllable in the room. It shows us that in life, the sweetest, most polite words are often designed to conceal the absolute sharpest teeth. Sorokin continues, stating his boss hopes this wedding will finally build a bridge between their warring families. Leon offers an ice-cold, razor-thin smile, replying that he does not recall having any relationship with anyone outside his own bloodline. The Russian remains completely unbothered. He reaches inside his heavy coat and produces a polished, breathtaking wooden box. He sets it on the desk as delicately as if it were glass, then steps back, presenting it as a wedding gift. He relays that Dragunov believes some blades are meant for showing off, while others are meant for ending things. We would do well to remember a hard truth here. When an enemy hands you a beautifully wrapped gift, they are simply showing you the exact weapon they plan to use against you. You and I have to appreciate the sheer psychological control Leon displays in this moment. He holds the giant in a dead stare before slowly opening the wooden box. Inside rests an 18th century Russian dagger, gleaming against blood-red velvet. The edge is so incredibly sharp it feels like it could cut the tension in the room. Leon simply snaps the lid shut. His voice remains perfectly steady as he instructs the man to thank his boss for the beautiful craftsmanship. Sorokin bows his head and turns to leave, but if you watch Marco closely, his eyes nervously dart sideways for a fraction of a second. This fleeting glance captures the tragic reality of betrayal. The people who plan to stab you in the back rarely possess the courage to look you directly in the eye. That nervous glance from Marco reveals everything. It is the anxious look of a guilty man, checking if his partner approves of his performance. Leon catches that micro-expression instantly. Once the door shuts, Marco leans against the wall, playing the clueless friend. Wondering aloud who sent the man, Leon slowly turns the wooden box in his hands and asks Marco directly if he has any idea. Marco nervously laughs it off, adding one more lie to a rotting pile of deceit. We jump forward to midnight, as Leon descends into his wine cellar. He pushes aside a fake rack of vintage bottles to reveal a hidden door. Life is often poetic in this way, the darkest, ugliest truths are almost always buried deep underground, carefully hidden right behind the things that appear the most beautiful. This secret room is an absolute ghost town. It has no cellular signals, no windows, and is entirely soundproof. Leon's father built it back when the federal agents were circling, and Leon has not stepped foot inside for 3 long years. But tonight, the ghosts are wide awake. He covers the massive oak table with the shattered pieces of his life. We see surveillance photos, hidden bank records, shell company documents, and that terrifying dagger resting in the center. Dante enters first. Notice how he immediately moves to press his back firmly against the cold wall. That simple movement is the ultimate lesson in survival. Once you experience how easily and completely trust can be broken, you learn to never let anyone stand behind you ever again. A few moments later, Father Antonio steps into the room, draped in a long black robe beneath a worn leather coat. This man serves as the ultimate living vault. He has been baptizing children and burying secrets for this family for 30 years. He steps up to the heavy table, takes one agonizing look at the scattered evidence, and immediately crosses himself. His hand actually trembles as he picks up the photograph of Isabella. He whispers that he held Leon as a tiny baby, and he simply cannot comprehend a woman capable of such calculated evil. It is a heartbreaking scene to witness, because it reinforces a brutal, enduring reality of human nature. The people who possess the faces of angels are sometimes the exact ones hired to drag you straight down into hell. Leon quietly asks the old priest to sit down, and Dante begins to lay out the full scope of the nightmare. Dragunov did not just construct this trap on a passing whim. He has been weaving this web for years. That charity gala where Leon first locked eyes with Isabella, Dragunov secretly purchased the seat right next to his. But the detail that truly shatters the soul involves Marco. 18 months ago, Marco's young son desperately needed an expensive heart surgery, and Dragunov silently paid the hospital bills. The lesson hidden in this betrayal is incredibly painful to accept. Sometimes, decent men commit the most horrific acts simply because they love their children too much, willingly selling their own souls just to keep their families breathing. Because Dragunov paid for that surgery, Marco literally signed his life away to the enemy in a nondescript Texas hotel room. Dante rolls out a massive map of Chicago across the oak table, and it is completely covered in red marker circles. He has highlighted the shipping docks, the trucking yards, the front restaurants, and the accounting offices. There are 16 specific targets in total. It is the literal heartbeat of Leon's entire operation, mapped out flawlessly for a synchronized slaughter. Dante points out that every single name found in the enemy's briefcase works at one of those 16 locations. It serves as a sobering reminder for all of us. Your grand empire is only ever as strong as your weakest link. And when that single link finally breaks, the entire map bleeds red. Father Antonio folds his weathered hands, quietly asking when the violence will break. Leon just stares at a small calendar on the wall, his eyes locked on a date circled 8 days away, his own wedding day. The psychological warfare here is absolutely staggering. They plan to strike when his men are completely vulnerable, draped in expensive suits instead of body armor. His traitorous best friend will stand right beside him, while the spy he must marry clings to his arm. The priest simply closes his eyes and crosses himself, knowing this sacred cathedral will soon become a slaughterhouse. It is a grim but vital truth about human nature. The people plotting your downfall will always try to turn your moment of greatest joy into your absolute weakest blind spot. The next afternoon, the cinematic atmosphere shifts entirely. Rosa pauses her quiet dusting to watch her young daughter, Sophie. The girl is sitting on the rug with her crayons, a picture of perfect innocence. But notice the brilliant visual storytelling here. Beside her scattered drawings sits a dark leather notebook Rosa has never seen before. Sophie colors for a moment, pauses, picks up a pencil, and scribbles a note with the intense focus of a seasoned informant before returning to her art. You and I can see the profound irony unfolding. The adults are fighting a massive shadow war, completely blind to the true observer in their midst. It teaches us a humbling reality. The people the world chooses to ignore are almost always the ones watching the entire game play out. Rosa sinks to her knees, her voice dropping to a fragile whisper as she asks if someone in this dark house is frightening her. Sophie does not even lift her eyes from yellow crayon. She simply murmurs no, entirely calm. Rosa spots the mysterious notebook, but restrains herself from snatching it, honoring the boundaries of her child. When asked about the book, Sophie smoothly replies that Leon is teaching her to observe like a true artist. It is a fascinating display of psychological loyalty. When children feel essential, their devotion becomes absolute. This holds a profound truth we often forget. If you treat someone small with genuine respect and give them a clear purpose, they will guard your darkest secrets with more loyalty than any hardened soldier ever could. Sophie calmly claims Leon told her that true artists document what they see. Rosa is certainly no fool. She knows her child is lying straight to her face, yet mothers possess a fierce intuitive radar. Rosa understands that whatever deception Sophie is spinning, she is doing it to shield someone else, instead of demanding answers. Rosa offers a tender smile, asking her little girl to come straight to her if the shadows of this house ever become too frightening. Sophie finally looks up, her small face entirely serious, and promises she will. This is the emotional anchor of the story. In an underworld completely suffocated by constant deceit and toxic ambition, a mother's fierce instinct to protect her innocent child remains the only incorruptible truth left standing in the dark. The cinematic tension masterfully escalates here. Rosa stands up, entirely unaware that Isabella has been lingering in the doorway like a ghost. The bride-to-be glides across the rug, clutching her wedding binder with that perfectly hollow smile reserved for the hired help. She gazes down at Sophie, smoothly complimenting the child for being so observant. Rosa immediately goes on the defensive, claiming she is just a little kid who rarely pays attention, but Isabella slowly drops into a crouch. Her smile turns to absolute ice as she whispers that children actually notice everything. They just lack the wisdom to know what they should keep hidden. It is a chilling life lesson for all of us. The true predators in this world are always quietly observing, especially in the moments you feel most secure. Analyze the brilliant framing in this moment. The heavy binder slips from Isabella's grip. As she reaches down, her eyes lock onto the crayon drawing. It shows a tall church surrounded by crude stick figures, the chilling detail. None of them have faces, and everyone is shaded in funeral black. Watch Isabella's reaction closely. For a fraction of a second, her polished mask shatters. A microscopic twitch of genuine fear crosses her features. Just as quickly, the artificial sweetness returns. She praises the church, asking if a wedding is coming. Sophie calmly replies she does not know yet, as the picture remains unfinished. Isabella silently collects her things and vanishes. It proves a powerful life lesson. Even the most fiercely calculated people can be completely unraveled by a simple, unfiltered truth. Moving into the shadows of that evening, the stakes reach a breaking point. Leon paces the dim hallway, finding Sophie on the bottom stair. She gently tugs his sleeve, whispering that Miss Bella looked at her differently today. She realizes the dangerous woman is finally starting to see her. Leon instantly processes the gravity of this. He spends the night in his pitch-black office, paralyzed by his reality. Isabella did not just look at an innocent child. She identified a fatal loose end. And syndicates do not allow loose ends to survive. By sunrise, the boss makes his definitive choice. His empire could burn to ash. The impending wedding could become an absolute disaster. But this teaches us what true morality looks like. A real protector will gladly sacrifice his entire kingdom to ensure one innocent soul makes it out alive. The next morning, Leon summons Rosa to his desk. Pay close attention to her physical performance. She enters frantically wiping her palms on her apron, carrying that deep terror working people feel when a ruthless man calls their name. He offers a seat, but she barely perches on the cushion, bracing for dismissal instead. Leon softens his voice. He expertly spins a believable lie about the staff quarters requiring urgent roof repairs. Then he deploys his shield. He is relocating her and Sophie to a luxury apartment across the city, complete with a private driver and their full salary intact. Rosa nods. But she knows something is deeply wrong. It is a stark truth of life, when a dangerously powerful person suddenly offers you an unearned paradise. It almost always means hell is about to break loose. He instructs her to work from the new apartment. Here is where the raw emotion completely guts the viewer. Rosa grips her apron, asking in a terrified whisper if she or Sophie made a mistake. Leon simply says no, releasing a shaky breath. She finally asks the dangerous question, why? Leon holds her gaze, admitting he just wants to ensure her little girl remains safe. The thematic irony is incredibly thick. Rosa slowly looks up, locking eyes directly with this feared mafia boss. Servants are meant to look at the floor, but she refuses to blink. Then she drops a massive emotional bomb. She reveals her late husband was a police officer, murdered 2 years ago investigating a case tied to Leon's own syndicate. It serves as a brutal life lesson. Our past sins will always find a way to eventually sit right across the desk from us. Rosa continues speaking, her tone strikingly hollow with grief. She explains the papers called the death a botched robbery, but she knew the truth. She confesses taking this job purely out of desperation to feed her child, forcing herself to believe the shooter's identity did not matter now. Analyze Leon's reaction. He does not defend himself or offer hollow sympathies. He sits paralyzed as horrifying puzzle pieces slam together in his mind. An old syndicate meeting. A problem his lieutenant Marco was supposed to handle quietly. The grim realization washes over him. Marco assassinated a police officer without his permission. This illustrates a terrifying life lesson. The ghosts you refuse to properly bury will always end up haunting the halls of your own home. You can feel the wave of raw regret crashing over Leon. He does not offer a manufactured apology. His voice drops to a whisper as he vows to protect her daughter as his own flesh. Rosa stares at him in that quiet second. The illusion of the cartel boss shatters. She no longer sees a monster, but a broken man swearing an oath he intends to die for. She gives a slow nod of acceptance. By 6 o'clock, a black sedan idles in the driveway, driven by 2 loyal guards. Rosa walks out with absolute dignity. This is not a retreat, it is a masterclass in survival. But little Sophie pauses. She lingers at the threshold, glancing back at Leon, who stands completely isolated in the fading light of his empire. It reminds us of a hard truth. Our greatest acts of redemption often leave us standing entirely alone in the dark. Defying expectations, the tiny girl sprints back and throws her arms around the mafia boss. Leon goes entirely rigid. This is a man who has not felt genuine warmth in years. Sophie buries her face in his shirt, mumbling a quiet promise to keep helping him. The emotional contrast is devastating. We jump forward to 5 days before the wedding, and the psychological game board is set. Leon transforms into a cold, calculated surgeon. The estate operates under a flawless veneer of normalcy. Meanwhile, the traitor Marco struts through the grand entrance with grotesque arrogance. He genuinely believes he is days away from taking the throne. But the invisible trap has already been sprung, initiated by a single folder. It shows us a profound life lesson. True. Lethal power never shouts its intentions, it operates in absolute, terrifying silence. Let us unpack this exchange together. Watch closely as Marco accepts that sealed envelope, stamped with the wax crest of the syndicate. Leon looks him dead in the eye, delivering a masterclass in manipulation. He tells Marco he is the only man left he truly trusts. Marco nods with the faux humility of a loyal soldier, eagerly copying down the fake vault locations, bank codes, and courier names. He is convinced he just handed himself the entire kingdom. But here is the bitter reality of betrayal. The exact moment you believe you have outsmarted the master, you have already stepped straight onto the gallows. Every detail in that envelope is a brilliantly constructed phantom, designed purely to misdirect. It leaves us with a chilling life lesson. The most devastating lies in this world will always come beautifully wrapped in the sweet illusion of absolute trust. Let us look at this together, shall we? The physical bank stood tall, but the map Marco handed over led to vaults holding nothing but paper and salt. By Tuesday afternoon, a tapped call from Brighton Beach proved the rat took the bait. Marco fed Volkov every calculated lie in under 48 hours. Dragunov is now plotting a massive strike that will only end in total humiliation. This exposes the tragedy of greed. Men become so fiercely blinded by what they want to take. They never ask who quietly left the door open. It shows us that chasing easy victories often leads straight into a deadly trap, while Dragunov chased phantoms. Leon was quietly slipping 80% of his best soldiers back into Chicago on completely ordinary commercial flights. The arrangement of this chessboard is brilliant. None of the returning men went near the main estate. They vanished into quiet, unremarkable safe houses. Over at St. Michael's, Father Antonio was busy building a silent fortress. 12 hardened veterans traded their suits for the gray uniforms of church ushers and florists. One soldier, who had bled for the family longer than Dragunov had lived in America, became a frail old sexton. This reveals a profound truth. Real loyalty does not need a loud voice or a public threat. True devotion is just a quiet man sweeping the floor, patiently waiting to protect the people he loves. They would never draw a weapon a second early or a second late. Next, Leon turned his cold attention to the musicians. Isabella booked an elegant string quartet for her big day, painting a picture of innocence, but Leon understood the brutal reality of their world. Dragunov would have inevitably threatened those players, so Leon made his move first. The musicians who arrived were his own phantoms. Their heavy cases were built for hardware deadlier than violins, and their hands were meant for pulling triggers, not drawing bows. The bitterest reality to accept was the bride herself. Wednesday night, Leon told Dante what had to be done. Dante made one quiet phone call. By Thursday, a Boston cousin sharing Isabella's dark hair landed in town. It is deeply heartbreaking. When you build your entire existence on anger and violence, even your most sacred moments must be completely shielded by loaded guns. This girl from Boston was never meant to walk down the aisle. Her purpose was to stand in a shadowed doorway, wearing a heavy veil, acting as perfect human bait. Meanwhile, Isabella strolled into the estate every afternoon with bright, rehearsed smiles. She brought cake samples and chatted about ribbon colors. She sat on Leon's lap, letting the warm light catch her diamond ring, playfully asking if he was excited. You almost have to pity her emptiness in this moment. She thought she was so clever playing the devoted partner. But there is a brutal lesson hidden in her pride. Unchecked arrogance makes us completely blind to the trap closing over our own heads. On Thursday evening, she paused at the door and asked if he was truly ready. Leon walked over and gently took her face in his hands. He looked her deep in the eyes, wearing the expression of a man consumed by love. He told her quietly that their wedding day would be the most important day of their lives. Isabella smiled and melted into his chest, unaware that he had just spoken a terrifying, literal truth. This reveals something deeply unsettling. The most dangerous lies in life are the ones brilliantly disguised as pure honesty. While Isabella played her selfish game of pretend, the actual work of survival was unfolding in Lincoln Park. Sophie never stopped watching from the shadows, every morning. Dante drove through heavy traffic to drop a harmless envelope on her table. Every evening, he returned to collect her meticulous notes, perfectly mapping out the rhythms of their enemies. You and I have probably seen 100 crime films. We know the classic archetypes: the muscle, the bosses, the hitmen. But let us pause the story right here. 3 days before the wedding, the biggest power move comes from a little girl. Sophie picks up the phone, defying the rules, and calls Leon. She begs to return to the estate. Leon tries to protect her, insisting it is dangerous. But Sophie drops a truth that hits harder than a bullet. She says she is entirely invisible to them. Arrogant men never look twice at a quiet child. A massive syndicate is about to be undone by someone nobody bothered to notice. It illustrates a timeless truth about life, often. The absolute greatest power you can ever possess is simply being vastly underestimated by those around you. Sophie insists she knows Isabella's exact rhythm. She makes a secret call before every major move, and will do it before the wedding. Picture Leon's face in this moment. He is a man who has stared down corrupt judges and his own ruthless father yet. This fragile child's voice completely breaks his armor. He caves. He says Dante will drive her, but she only gets 30 minutes, using a forgotten sweater as an excuse. Cut to that afternoon. A dark sedan pulls into the driveway. Out steps this little girl in a heavy coat, hiding a plain notebook in her backpack. It is a moving image, a child stepping onto a hidden battlefield. We learn a beautiful truth from her actions. True bravery does not always roar. Sometimes it is just a quiet, determined step forward when everyone else decides to retreat. She walks into the kitchen exactly as taught. Her eyes are glued to the floor, completely invisible in her own home. Dante stays outside by the shed, his hand hovering near his holster, sweating bullets for this kid. Sophie executes the plan perfectly. She grabs the faded sweater from the locker. But here arrives the fatal moment, the pivot of the narrative. On her way out, she stops by the window overlooking the garden. There is Isabella, the future queen, pacing the gravel path, phone pressed to her ear. Isabella thinks she is completely untouchable inside her fortress. She never notices the tiny shadow watching behind the glass. It highlights a classic human failure. We build massive walls to keep enemies out, completely forgetting that our true downfall usually comes from the inside. Imagine Sophie crouching under that frosty windowsill. Her hand is cramping, the pencil shaking, but she captures every treasonous word carried on the freezing wind. Isabella is laying out her treacherous hand. The moment Leon is dead, she will betray her Russian allies. She proudly claims she built this empire, not Leon or Dragunov. She demands Chicago for herself. Sophie writes every detail down, slips the notebook away, and walks back to Dante in 27 minutes. Isabella just signed her own death warrant without knowing it. She believes she is the smartest person in the room, entirely blinded by ego. But toxic ambition is tricky. If you let arrogance drive the car, it will steer you right off a cliff while you are still bragging about the view. Fast forward to that night in the safe apartment. The tension in the tiny kitchen is suffocating. Sophie pushes the notebook across the table and points at the words. She tells Leon his beautiful bride is plotting to kill both him and Dragunov. Leon freezes. He sits under the buzzing lamp, reading a child's pencil scratches over and over. You can feel the air turn to ice. In 5 brutal seconds, Leon's entire reality shatters. He believed he was playing a clean game against 2 clear enemies. But the reality is profoundly uglier. You and I both do this in our own lives, do we not? We build comfortable, neat little stories just to make sense of the chaos around us. But the harsh truth does not care about your comforting story. It will inevitably tear your fragile house down anyway. Let us dissect the tragic irony of Leon's blind spot. He assumed his enemy was Dragunov, the classic mobster with a loud revenge plan. He thought Isabella was an innocent pawn, and Marco was the sole leak. But the picture was completely upside down. Isabella was never a helpless pawn. She was the ruthless grandmaster all along. 2 years ago, when she laughed at Leon's joke at that charity gala, she was not falling in love. She was already cashing Dragunov's checks, planning to steal the syndicate from both men. It makes you sick. Analyzing how easily love can be weaponized for power, it is a harsh pill to swallow in life. Sometimes the people who smile the brightest at you are the ones quietly sharpening a knife in the dark. Giving someone your blind trust is simply a slow suicide. Isabella delivers a masterclass in psychological deception, and you almost have to respect the terrifying ice in her veins. She weaponized the Russians' deep hatred. Worse, she weaponized Leon's desperate loneliness to build her own bloody throne. Come wedding day, everybody believes they are the winner. Dragunov thinks he gets the empire. Marco expects a promotion. But Isabella plans to step over their bleeding bodies and walk out of that cathedral as the Queen of Chicago. When Dante realizes this, he warns they are facing 3 enemies. Leon just shakes his head, his voice dead and hollow. It is fascinating how tragedy blinds us to our toxic greed. Everyone gets so busy digging a deep grave for the other guy. They never realize they are all standing inside the exact same hole. Today you and I are going to unpack this story together, starting with a stroke of dark genius. Leon flips the entire script on Dante, revealing they are not going to fight their 3 enemies directly. Instead, they will step back and let the predators slaughter each other. Consider Isabella and her twisted choreography for a moment. She designed the wedding as a massive kill box, slipping her secret hitman into the crowd. She wants the Russian bullets to hit her decoys, and her bullets to hit the Russians, leaving Leon dead in the center. It is a brilliant strategy, completely devoid of human warmth. But it shows us a terrifying truth about our own lives. The most dangerous traps are always the ones where people use our own predictable habits against us. We have to appreciate the chilling elegance of this counterattack. It is so much simpler than going to war. Father Antonio, a quiet man of God, becomes the trigger man for an absolute massacre. He will stand at the altar, wait for both sets of killers to draw their weapons, and give one tiny signal. But Leon will not be standing there to take the bullets. He plans to slip into the shadows 30 seconds early, hidden by the choir. Without Leon in the middle, the two hit squads will just see each other as the primary threat. The cathedral will become a slaughterhouse of mistaken identity. It is brutal, but it teaches a massive lesson we can all apply, sometimes. The smartest way to win a war is simply refusing to show up to the battlefield in the first place. Just let this quiet moment sink into your chest for a second. Out of nowhere, little Sophie speaks up from her chair. She compares these hardened, bloodthirsty killers to two stray cats fighting over a piece of fish. She says the cats just keep tearing each other apart, completely unaware that the fish has already swum away. It is so perfectly innocent, yet so devastatingly accurate that Dante is left breathless. Leon looks at this orphaned kid, a child the underworld treated like garbage, and gives her a real genuine smile. Not his fake boardroom smirk, but a real one. It proves that true wisdom does not come from a life of violence or power. Sometimes, the clearest view of the world comes from the smallest eyes. Never dismiss the quiet ones. Pause the movie right here. It is the night before the wedding, and the silence in the estate is practically screaming at you. Everybody else is in their places. Dante paces the frozen streets, while the priest lights candles for men who will die tomorrow. The traitor Marco sleeps like a baby, thinking he won the lottery, but Leon is completely alone, standing by his massive window, staring at the pitch-black water of Lake Michigan. It is the loneliest shot in the entire story, a king isolated in his castle, knowing his world burns tomorrow. It makes you realize something profound about leadership and power in our own lives. True responsibility is a profoundly lonely road, and the heaviest burdens are always carried in the dark. Leon watches a single ship moving out on the dark water, and his mind drifts back to his mother. She died when he was just 10 years old from pneumonia, which is just the polite, historical word for freezing to death in a house with no heat. She was a fragile woman, but she carried him through winters that would break a normal person. He remembers the warmth of her cheek and the one warning she gave him before she faded away. She told him the strongest man never wins the fight. The man who sees the most clearly is the one who survives. Never close your eyes to the truth. Decades later, standing in the dark, that little boy finally understands what she meant. If you want to survive the brutal storms of life, clarity is the only weapon that actually matters. Stick with me here, because you and I need to see this visual together. It is pure heartbreak. Leon turns from the window and looks down at his heavy oak desk. Sitting next to each other are two items that represent the absolute destruction of his soul. First is a simple, white gold wedding band. He picked it out himself, imagining the quiet mornings he would spend watching Isabella wear it. Those mornings are officially dead. Right beside the ring is a lacquered wooden box containing a gorgeous, lethal Russian dagger, sent as a mocking wedding gift. Love and murder. Sitting side by side under the soft lamplight, it is a chilling warning about how close those extremes really are. We pour our hearts into building a future, forgetting it can burn down in a second. Leon looks at the ring and the blade, and it finally clicks in his mind. These are just two pieces of metal, shaped differently, but designed to do the exact same thing. They are both weapons. Every single trap set for him over the last week came wrapped up in something stunning and beautiful. Just as he realizes this, his phone buzzes softly on the desk. It is Isabella. Her voice is warm, sleepy, and perfectly fake. She whispers for him to sleep well, saying tomorrow is their special day. The absolute sickening irony of those words hits you like a truck. She thinks she is plotting a funeral, while he is quietly orchestrating hers. Here is the ultimate truth of the human heart. The most devastating betrayals always come from the people inside your own walls. Let us pause right here, because we both know this is the classic calm before the storm. Look at Leon, playing the perfect romantic on the phone, telling her he loves her too. He hangs up, but instead of prepping for a wedding, he is mentally digging a grave. He reaches past his files to grab a velvet pouch he has had since he was 22. Inside is the only picture he has of his mother. She is 28, sitting in a cheap kitchen chair with him as a little kid. They are not smiling, they are staring out. Like they already know how this tragic movie ends. He flips it over and writes a simple thank you in slow Italian. The bitter irony is so clear. Sometimes the most dangerous people in the room are still just scared kids looking for a way to say goodbye. He is thanking the photo for seeing him when nobody else cared, sliding it into a clean envelope addressed to Sophie. Fully aware he might leave that church in a body bag now. Cut to Saturday morning in Chicago. The sky looks exactly like a polished steel gun barrel. Down at the cathedral, the production value is off the charts. We have florists in white gloves arranging pristine roses by 8 in the morning. By 9, they roll out the massive red carpet, lighting 400 ivory candles like they are preparing a royal coronation. Stained glass pours dramatic colors all over the marble floor. It is a picture-perfect fairy tale setting, right? Except the carpet is red for a reason. It proves that beautifully polished exteriors are usually just there to hide the blood. By 10 in the morning, the guest list turns into a federal indictment waiting to happen. The heavy hitters are rolling up in long black cars from 3 different airports. You have all these old men with hands like worn leather hugging on the cathedral steps, acting like honorable businessmen. Their wives are dripping in pearls that have attended more funerals than actual weddings. Every single face out there has a dedicated file in a government drawer. And the best part, the Chicago cops holding the perimeter in their crisp uniforms pocketed fat envelopes from Marco just 12 hours ago. The law is literally standing on the sidewalk, getting paid to look the other way. It is a harsh lesson that authority and respectability are often just illusions bought by the highest bidder. Let us take a closer look together at how the boss makes his entrance. At 10:30, Leon steps out of his car wearing a razor-sharp black tuxedo with a single red rose pinned to his lapel. He plays the role flawlessly, calm, solemn, the absolute perfect groom. But watch the background details. Dante gets out right behind him, wearing an invisible earpiece and carrying a custom rig under his vest that holds 2 guns instead of 1, up on the steps. Marco is waiting with his arms spread wide and a massive fake smile plastered on his face. Marco is waiting to hug the man he fully intends to murder before lunchtime. It shows you a very dark reality about human nature. The people plotting your downfall will almost always be the first ones to greet you with a warm smile. This right here is the scene that really breaks your heart. Marco yells out to the boss, celebrating the big day, and Leon hugs him. But Leon holds that embrace just 1 second too long. He feels that familiar weight. The exact same back he dragged out of a Cleveland alley with a bullet in it a decade ago. Leon whispers into his ear, thanking him for 20 years of loyalty. Marco just smiles and pats his back, completely clueless. He has no idea he was just handed his own eulogy. Meanwhile, inside the dressing room, Isabella is admiring her antique ivory silk gown in the mirror. She thinks she is the one running this entire chessboard. It is a fascinating lesson in psychology. Absolute arrogance will always blind a person to the trap, closing right beneath their feet. You have to appreciate the profound irony unfolding in this opening scene. Isabella's mother rests on a satin bench, weeping into a handkerchief as if this were a genuine celebration of love. Bridesmaids nervously adjust the veil. Yet Isabella stares out the window at the luxury cars, smiling at her reflection. She genuinely believes she is about to be crowned queen of the syndicate. It is a fatal stroke of ego. Let us cut away to the real emotional gravity. Miles north in a Stark apartment, Rosa sits frozen. Sophie is beside her, clutching a leather notebook like a fragile bird. Dante's guards watch the windows. There is no glamour here, only crushing dread. We often mistake grand displays for power. But true control is the quiet terror felt by those trapped beneath it. Today you and I are going to unpack how cinematic tension is masterfully constructed here. Sophie stares at a glowing laptop, watching live camera feeds of the altar. Cut back to the cathedral. The heavy bells strike 11 o'clock. A senior priest steps up to the pulpit, takes a deep breath, and unknowingly triggers a historic bloodbath in Chicago organized crime. The organ strikes a heavy chord that washes over the room like a slow wave of doom. 400 elite guests turn in unison. The massive oak doors swing open, revealing Isabella on her father's arm, framed against a bleak sky. She is about to walk down an aisle rigged with deadly traps. It is a harsh reminder that our grandest, most arrogant ambitions often march us straight into our very own destruction. She certainly deserves praise for this breathtaking presentation. Her veil floats behind her, the seed pearls catching the flicker of candlelight. She glides down the crimson carpet with a practiced, arrogant grace she has rehearsed for years. But pause the frame and study her eyes. She is not looking lovingly toward a husband. She is conducting a cold, tactical sweep. Pew 6 on the left, pew 9 on the right. The fourth column. She is taking attendance for a massacre. She spots 4 of her hidden hitmen blending with the wealthy guests. Hands folded like polite choir boys, she allows herself a tiny private smirk. She honestly believes she is 3 minutes away from inheriting an empire. Arrogance is a dangerous blinder, always hiding the cliff right in front of us. 30 feet from the altar, she pauses for a dress adjustment. The string quartet shifts to a slow processional hymn, and the grand illusion shatters. The first violinist does not pick up his bow. Instead, he reaches into his case and pulls out a submachine gun, up in the balcony. 3 more musicians drop their act and do the same. 3 men in the choir loft whip out compact rifles from beneath their robes. These are 7 of Dragunov's elite Russian killers, hiding in plain sight. They aim their sights at the exact spot on the marble altar where Leon is supposed to be standing. It is a brilliant trap with just one fatal flaw. Leon is no longer standing there. We often spend all our energy building the perfect cage, only to realize our prize has already slipped away into the night. Let us rewind the tape exactly 30 seconds, when the priest raised his hand for a blessing. He whispered one word in Italian and shoved Leon through a hidden door into the sacristy. The wood clicked shut without a sound, leaving the altar empty. The Russian hitmen are left aiming at burning candles. They hesitate for a single half-second in this brutal underworld. A moment of doubt gets you killed. In the second pew, Isabella's loyalists spring into action. They rip guns from their tailored suits, aiming at the balcony. Isabella had trained them to believe any surprise shooter was a Russian coming for her. They do not blink. Paranoia takes over exactly as Leon calculated. When you build your life entirely on deception, your own toxic mistrust will always pull the trigger for you. Just like that, the cathedral transforms into an absolute slaughterhouse. Gunfire rips across the marble nave, stained glass shatters into dust, and plaster drops from the ceiling like snow. Aging mobsters shove their wives to the floor, selfishly crawling for the doors. Isabella's father takes a bullet to the shoulder and goes down hard, and Isabella, she stands frozen in the center of the aisle, wrapped in ruined ivory silk. She spins around, staring wildly at the empty altar. The horrific realization finally washes over her face. Leon was never there. She screams at her loyalists to stop, but her voice is drowned out by the roar of rifles. It vividly shows how rapidly our delicate illusions of control shatter when chaotic violence finally takes the wheel. Stick with me, because you and I are going to marvel at the psychological genius of this chaos. The Russians see Isabella's crew shooting and assume they were ambushed by Leon's guards. Isabella's men look up and believe Dragunov is double-crossing them. Neither side realizes they are fighting for the same team. They are blindly ripping each other to pieces, up in the balcony shadows. Dragunov watches his fake musicians drop. He watches the men in the pews bleed out. His flawless assassination plot is dissolving into ash right beneath his boots. His sharp features turn to pure stone. The bitter realization of being outsmarted stings far worse than any physical bullet. Anger blinds us to the truth, but unchecked arrogance is what truly destroys our foundation. This is the magnificent shot they would use for the cinematic movie poster. Altar candles flicker wildly in the crossfire. Echoes of screaming guests bounce off the stone vault, then, right through the choking white smoke, framed perfectly in the main entrance doors. A figure steps back inside. He wears a black tuxedo. The red rose on his lapel is pristine. A heavy pistol is gripped in his hand. Leon Moretti did not run away. He came back to finish the job. He struts down that ruined center aisle with Dante flanking him, holding a rifle ready. 20 of the syndicate's seasoned soldiers march in right behind them. The elaborate trap has been sprung. We learn here that true leaders do not flee the storm. They simply wait for the lightning to strike before stepping into the rain. Let's pause the film right here and look at this tragic bloodbath. These fallen men are the ghosts Marco forgot to account for on his list. Hear that heavy marching over the cracked marble. The chaotic storm is dying down. Up in the choir loft, 4 of Dragunov's shooters are corpses, and 2 are begging on their knees. Down in the pews, Isabella's crew is wiped out. One man drags himself away, painting the pristine white stone bright red up on the balcony. One desperate Russian sprays a final burst of bullets. Leon's men do not flinch. 2 surgical shots ring out, and the noise stops forever. The survivors are dragged to the wall by seasoned professionals. The cycle of violence always ends exactly like this, with silent men sweeping up the bloody remains of toxic masculinity and a shattered ego. Now shift your focus up to the balcony. Viktor Dragunov steps out from the shadows, expecting to survey his grand victory like a conquering king. Instead, his icy composure is shattered. Pure rage twists his face. He raises a heavy pistol, aims down at Leon, and pulls the trigger. The bullet merely shatters a marble pillar 2 feet away, raining down white dust. Dragunov never gets a second attempt. Dante has already bounded up those side stairs like a relentless hunting dog. The Russian boss hears a floorboard creak behind him a fraction of a second too late. He twists around. catching Dante's bullet right between his shoulder blades. 5 years of obsessive plotting to conquer the syndicate. And Victor simply drops his gun, collapsing into nothingness. A life spent blindly chasing toxic power usually ends with absolutely nothing left to hold on to. Dragunov never moves again. His Russian empire bleeds out on a dusty carpet lit by broken stained glass. Stick with me, because this next part is where the story truly breaks you. Down in the center aisle stands Marco. There is no blood on his tuxedo, but his face is chalk white. You can see the exact second he realizes 18 months of backstabbing just went up in smoke. Leon calmly covers the last 20 steps and stares at him. 20 years, Marco. Marco tries to speak, but his throat is dead. 20 years. Leon repeats, his voice terrifyingly calm. What did you sell me for? Marco crumbles. He drops to his knees on the cold marble like a broken sinner begging at the altar. My son, he chokes out. Matteo, the surgery. We learn a harsh truth here. The deepest betrayals rarely come from sheer malice. They usually grow from the desperate roots of human fear. This is the exact moment that tragedy firmly locks in. They told me there was no other way, Marco pleads. But I want you to listen to Leon. He does not yell. He drops the saddest truth you will ever hear in this underworld. There was time, Marco. You could have knocked on my door. I would have paid for everything. I would have flown the best doctor in. I would have sat beside you in that waiting room. It is a crushing blow. Leon is telling him he threw away a brotherhood for nothing. You chose betrayal over trust. Marco hangs his head, defeated by his own tragic flaw. All around them, the surviving bosses slowly crawl out of hiding. They form a solemn circle. They are the mandatory witnesses to the oldest Mafia law in the books. Leon raises his gun, just one shot, in the end. Our refusal to ask for help can become the very thing that finally destroys us. Marco hits the floor dead before his brain registers the bullet. The cathedral doors bang open as the last guests run screaming into the street. The corrupt cops waiting outside do nothing, exactly as paid now. Hit pause again and look at Isabella. The supposedly brilliant mastermind is left standing completely alone in the aisle. Her veil is ripped. Her grand gown is destroyed, stained with gunpowder smoke and dead men's blood. She is trembling, her makeup smeared into a tragic mess as she grips a crushed bouquet of roses. Leon slowly walks down the crimson carpet and stops right in front of her. He reaches into his ruined tuxedo pocket and pulls out a tiny white gold wedding ring. It is the exact one he personally picked out for her. We see a haunting reminder here that the ultimate price of demanding absolute control is absolute isolation. Watch this psychological knockout land. Leon takes her shaking hand, gently pressing that heavy gold ring into her palm before folding her trembling fingers over it. You won the wedding, Amor, he whispers. But you lost everything else. It is a devastating emotional blow, leaving her alive but entirely hollowed out inside. Fast forward exactly 3 weeks. The entire city of Chicago is still reeling from the cathedral shootout, with morning papers screaming about the longest night in mob history. Every news channel plays that shaky phone footage of terrified, wealthy guests fleeing into the freezing morning air. The mayor is panicking, and the FBI is demanding answers. But the cathedral cameras mysteriously recorded nothing but dead static for 18 minutes. A pure coincidence, right? Nobody says a single word to the authorities. The ancient code of silence holds absolute power here. The wounded gunmen smuggled out the back door simply vanish into the vast maze of local hospitals. Federal agents cannot find one credible witness to place Leon inside that church, and none of the recovered bullets match his weapons, so. After 30 days of intense pressure, the government quietly shoves his file back into the dark, but Isabella. Her karma arrives with brutal precision. All her secret phone logs, her hidden offshore accounts, and the secure deposit box she thought was a ghost suddenly surface. An anonymous shadow simply drops plain envelopes packed with damning evidence right onto the desks of a federal task force. It is the ultimate poetic justice. Isabella gets absolutely nailed to the wall. They hit her with conspiracy, racketeering, the heaviest charges they can find. The judge instantly denies her bail, leaving her staring down a trial that will consume years of her life. Meanwhile, the rival crime families out east read the room perfectly, sending their quick condolences followed by their absolute submission. The Moretti Empire is suddenly more untouchable than it has been in 30 years. But you and I know this narrative is not truly about raw power. Let us cut to a quiet Tuesday. Leon, arguably the most dangerous man in the city, drives entirely alone to an ordinary apartment building. Tucking a thick envelope under his arm, he climbs 8 flights of stairs and knocks softly on a faded door. Rosa answers. Rosa sees this terrifying underworld boss standing on her welcome mat, and she completely freezes in terror. After a tense heartbeat, she steps aside to let him pass. Little Sophie is sitting at the worn kitchen table, deeply focused on her drawing. Notice how she reacts here. She does not run up and hug him like some cheap Hollywood movie. She carefully sets her pencil down, treating it like something incredibly fragile, and just watches him approach. Leon sits across from this tiny girl, placing the envelope between them like a peace offering. He slides out a thick stack of legal papers to show Rosa the details. He has quietly established an ironclad trust fund, making Sophie the sole beneficiary for full tuition, housing and living expenses anywhere she wants to go. The signature resting at the bottom is his, and the dollar amount is so massive, it would make a veteran banker dizzy. Rosa actually covers her mouth to stifle a gasp, but that is just money, and money is cheap in his world. It is the second document that carries the real weight. Leon unfolds a single sheet of paper, sliding it toward Sophie, but stops her before she can read it. "I need to tell you something myself," he says softly. He explains that her dad was a truly great cop who was building a case against someone inside the crime family. Her father found out who was hurting innocent people, and that man murdered him to keep the secret buried. Sophie does not flinch or look away. Her wide, ancient eyes stay locked onto the face of this hardened criminal. What we are watching is the rare confession of a king to a child. His name was Marco. Leon admits, "The man I took out 3 weeks ago. The exact same traitor who stole your father from you." He looks right into her eyes and forces out the hardest words for a proud man to ever speak. "I am sorry I did not know sooner, and I am sorry it took a brave little girl with a notebook to finally open my eyes." You might expect her to burst into tears right here, but she does not. She just slides out of her chair, walks straight up to the most feared man in Chicago, and wraps her tiny arms around his neck. "Thank you for telling me the truth," she whispers into his heavy coat. When she finally lets go, he reaches into his pocket and places something small into her open hand. It is a brand new, perfectly sharpened blue pencil. It is the exact same color as the one she purposely left under his office desk on the day this entire crazy saga started. Now Leon tells her softly, "You can draw any house you want." Sophie stares at the pencil for a long moment before looking up with those intensely serious eyes. "I am going to draw a house," she tells him, "with 3 people who never leave." That simple line just breaks your heart, does it not? A few minutes later, the terrifying boss, who just wiped out half the local underworld, is standing completely alone in a cheap apartment hallway. He leaves his palm resting flat against her closed door for his entire life. He fully believed the world belonged only to the most brutal men with the deadliest weapons. He realizes in that empty hallway just how completely blind he has always been. The person who ultimately saved his life, his legacy, and his entire empire was not a hardened soldier or a brilliant strategist. It was a 7-year-old kid that his expensive security detail never even bothered to look at. And here is where we need to stop and really think about this, you and I sometimes. The people society treats as completely invisible are the only ones actually paying attention. As we unpack this ending, we have to recognize the irony. We are constantly taught to chase raw power and bow down to the loudest voices in the room, but real, unshakable courage usually hides in the quietest corners. It is the kid holding a blue pencil, watching everything we miss. Let us hit pause right here at the very end of it all. You and I just watched this heavy story unfold, and the bitterest irony is staring us directly in the face. It is always the invisible people who actually see the truth. Everyone is always so busy staring at the massive picture that they completely ignore the quiet soul standing in the corner. That is our simple, meaningful lesson for today. When a quiet friend like Sophie finally decides to speak up, you had better stop and listen. Because they usually hold the exact piece of the puzzle you are missing. If this psychological breakdown hit you where it hurts, leave a like, share it around, and subscribe. I genuinely want to know if Sophie reminds you of someone in your own life who opened your eyes to the truth. I am not just saying this to fill up the silence either. We actually read every single comment you leave down there, and a lot of the time, your real experiences become the beating heart of the next stories we put together. It is pretty amazing how human connection works like that. From everyone working behind the scenes on this channel, we genuinely wish you a healthy body, a peaceful mind, and a life packed with those small, quiet joys that most people just walk right past. Seriously. Take care of yourselves out there in the real world, and more importantly, remember to look out for the invisible people around you before it is too late. Keep your eyes open, Stay safe. And I will be right back here waiting for you when we break down our very next story.
A major theme of the story is invisibility. Sophie and her mother Rosa move through the Moretti estate quietly. Rosa cleans rooms, Sophie draws on the floor, and powerful people walk past them as if they are part of the furniture. To Isabella, Marco, and the other conspirators, they are not threats because they are not considered important. That mistake becomes their downfall. The story teaches an important lesson about human dignity. Never underestimate people because of their social position. Housekeepers, drivers, cleaners, servers, children, assistants, and quiet workers often see more than anyone realizes. They hear conversations. They notice habits. They recognize when someone behaves differently. Because powerful people often ignore them, they sometimes become witnesses to the truth. Sophie's mother teaches her a beautiful lesson. When people do not see you, you get to see who they really are. That sentence contains one of the deepest messages in the story. Character is revealed in how people behave when they think no one important is watching. Isabella performs love in front of Leon, but when she believes she is unseen, she reveals greed, betrayal, and ambition. Marco appears loyal, but in hidden conversations he exposes his treachery. Dragunov believes he is controlling the game, but he also fails to see the child watching from the edge of the room. For viewers, this lesson is deeply educational. Treat every person with respect, not because they might be useful, but because they are human. A person's job title does not define their intelligence, courage, or value. The story reminds us that society often ignores the very people who understand it best. The invisible ones are not weak. They are often the clearest witnesses of truth.